Welcome to BHS. Whether you're in person or you're watching online, we welcome you to Denver's longest running business networking group, filled with small business owners who believe that they are in their business because of a higher calling and that their purpose is on point with the business that they're in. We meet here every first and third Thursday and have a delicious breakfast and a presenter that gives a topic about personal and professional development and casual business networking time. We encourage all of you to set coffee appointments. Of course, if you're watching online, you get to witness this amazing business presentation, but you miss out on the most valuable thing, which is connection here with other business owners. So we invite you to come down to the corner of Garrison and Alameda to join us next, September 1st for speed networking with Vanessa Raymond. So this is a great event. You're gonna get to meet over 7 other business owners in 1 hour, and you're just gonna shuffle down the table until you meet the next person. So that's a really fun, exciting event. I encourage you to come out. Today, your speaker is Robert White, and he has founded and led training industry success stories, Lifespring and ARC International, with a combined 1.3 million graduates. He lived and worked in Japan, Hong Kong, and mainland China for 23 years. He authored the essays for the award-winning photo journal One World, One People, and his best-selling book, Living an Extraordinary Life, is available in English and Chinese. And he is a resident of Denver, lives just right down the street. And so I met Robert through a colleague and a video producer, and that's how we know each other. But he's also worked with John Denver, which is a popular artist here at this center. And so please help me welcome your speaker today for practical leadership, relationships that matter, Robert White.
Can I get the last table to move up to the front table? You know, there's a certain kind of person that hides in the back, and I'm always fascinated with them. I want to find out more about them, get them up close so I can interview them. Good morning. It's great to be with you. It's great to be with a group that combines business and spirituality. Personally, I'm not a teacher of spirituality. I'm very much a student, and so I'm in that regard. I'm here with you. I do have some experience with business and with personal growth, transformational trainings. That's been my life, or most of my life. I receive these days very nice introductions. You know, they rave about me, and there's a video that we couldn't quite make it work here, but it pretends that I've never done anything wrong. You know, one of those videos. But the most special thing about me is I'm an extremely average person. I'm not very disciplined in some ways. I struggle with my weight. I've been incredibly good at getting married. And incredibly bad at staying married. So I'm a lot like you, really. And well, there are probably some people here that are a lot more special than me. The part that I think that is special is I'm a learner. I started that way very early in my life and have continued. I'm eager to learn, and I don't shut myself off from learning from success, nor from failure. And like most people, I've learned the most when I've been slapped upside the head. And I have a couple of those experiences. When I was 20, there's a lot of ways to start this story of introducing myself and then getting to know you a bit. But I think turning points are a good way to introduce anyone. And a turning point for me was that at 17 years old, I graduated from high school. And there's a lot in this little quick story that tells you who I am, or at least a lot about my background. I had a graduating class of 300 students, and I graduated number 6. And in that same year, I had the best, highest rated top 40 radio show in the state of Wisconsin. I made more money that year than my father had ever made. And I was supporting my family. My father had died when I was just a few days after my 15th birthday. And so I called my mother. My family had moved back south. I was living with another family in Green Bay. And I called my mom. I was kind of proud of myself. And I said, hey, I'm number 6, and I was named most likely to succeed. And she said, why weren't you number 1? It tells you a lot, doesn't it? The single most impactful person in my life was just extremely critical. And she also was extremely hardworking. She had been widowed 3 times. The joke in our family was it was her cooking. Old joke, but kind of true. And she was hardworking, and in my lifetime with her, I never heard her tell a victim story. She never felt anything but, what's next, no matter what happened in her life. If you look at those 2 qualities, that being really responsible for your life and that you can recover, kind of from anything, and working hard, I guess, so it's 3 things. That's a pretty good model. So even though she was an angry and violent woman who should not have had children and had a lot of them, she had some good qualities that I mirror today, and I'm grateful to her for that. But at 17, getting chosen most likely to succeed in a way sounds really great, but the truth is if you're 17 years old and you're on the radio, which was a big deal at that time, the kids on the wrong side of the tracks voted for me because I was their neighbor, and the kids on the right side of the tracks, kind of admired this goofball that somehow had gotten this radio job and succeeded at it. Another turning point was 10 years later, exactly. At 27, I was broke. I had been married and divorced. I felt horribly guilty about it. I had had 3 heart attacks, and I had been told that I would die by the age of 35. I had daily chest pain. My life was a mess. And one of my friends, by that time I'm living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at that time one of the squarest cities on the planet. And, hip never occurred to anybody from Milwaukee. Maybe that's still true. And a friend went out to California and went to one of the early human potential movement trainings called Mind Dynamics. And he came back and he raved about it. And he said, you've got to go. And of course I resisted him and I said no. And, I did what a lot of us do with a new idea. And the more he told me about this experience, the more I didn't want to go. But then I started watching him. One thing I noticed is we're in similar businesses, and mine continued to struggle, and his took off. And then I noticed that he'd been having problems in his marriage, and suddenly he's raving about this new relationship that he's creating with his wife. And the third thing, the most dramatic thing, was he had something I never knew existed. It's called adult onset acne. Now, you get it as a teenager, you think you're going to die. It's the worst thing that ever happened to you, but it's gone in a year or so, right? Whenever those hormones stop raging through you, you adjust. And but if you get it as an adult, it persists. That's what I learned about it, and he had it. So he's in a sales business, and his face looks like 40 miles of bad road. And it bothered him a lot, affected him a lot in terms of self-esteem. He started avoiding certain meetings because he didn't like how he looked. And he tried all kinds of things. I remember one time he had some kind of facial abrasion done, which turned his face bright red like the butt on one of those monkeys at the zoo, you know, which is, you know, not a good hello, I'm here to sell you something kind of presentation. And his face cleared up within 3 months of doing this training. All this time I'm saying, no, I'm not going. And then they brought the training to Milwaukee, the first training ever in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so I grudgingly went with arms crossed, legs crossed, eyes crossed, my usual negative, cynical show up. And 4 days later, my life changed. And it, you know, sounds like a cliche all these years later, but it did. I found out some things about me. And it was really the first time that I spent 4 days looking at me. And so I learned about that thing my mother had modeled called personal responsibility, owning it all. I learned that I was driving people away from me. I'm trying to recruit people, and I'm actively driving them away from me, basically by being my mom, you know, by being that uber critical, negative person. So, and some people say, well, you got out of the training, your whole life changed instantly, and the answer is no. But something happened. It was fascinating. It was like watching myself from above. I'd still throw out one of these really critical comments. Only what changed after the training was I could see it in the air. Does that make sense? You know, like I could see my words floating through the air and landing on people and blowing them up. Not a good feeling. So then I got to phase two. Phase two was, you know, I still thought it. I still tried to say it, but I didn't want to see that explosion over there in that person. So I started swallowing my words. And it happened a lot of times. It's very uncomfortable, actually. So I got to that point, and then I got to the point where I wasn't thinking it as often. And now in the old Mind Dynamics training, there's not one word said about business, not one word said about money. But my little business tripled in size the year after I did that training. And to say it simply, because a lot of people ask, I got me out of the way. The business was there to grow. And I started listening to me and being in a better relationship with people. And the following year, it went up 10 times. And that led to me selling that business, moving to New York City. I was a contract sales trainer for a while. And on a percentage of the increase, I don't know if any of you have ever worked on that kind of an arrangement. It's kind of like if you don't do a good job, you starve, especially in New York. And if you do a good job, you get rich, or at least for me. So I made a lot of money on some fame. And the way I did it was when I had my business, I had about 30 people. I interviewed every one of them every week. That's how I ran the business. You know, what did you promise? What did you actually do? What did you learn? I don't know if you know that routine, but that really works, by the way. And I go to New York, I have 850 salespeople. It's pretty hard to interview every one of them every week, right? So I started doing weekend sales trainings, and I started bringing in the New York-based Mind Dynamics instructor to do an hour, hour and a half every time I did one of these weekends. And then after she spoke, I would enroll people in the training. Not because I understood it, I didn't. Not because I was getting paid, I wasn't. But because I found out that when I sent people to that training, my life got better. It was totally selfish, totally. And so they found out about me. I put 400 people in the training. And one day I got a phone call from the founder of Mind Dynamics, a man named Alexander Everett. Alexander is kind of the grandfather of the whole the commercial human potential movement. A company called EST came out of Mind Dynamics. My company, Lifespring, came out of Mind Dynamics. Impact, SciWorld, there are a whole lot of companies were founded by people that had worked for Mind Dynamics. But he called me and introduced himself. I didn't even know his name. And he offered me a ticket to fly from New York to San Francisco and meet him. It was my first ever first-class flight. I remember that. And 10 days later, I was president of Mind Dynamics. I spent 4 years there, a couple of years kind of straightening out the U.S. business, a couple of years running around the world. So I'm 30 years old, and I'm having this incredible experience. I'm learning from a master. I'm traveling the world. It was another turning point for me. And also in that last 2 years of starting these foreign subsidiaries, I went through Alexander's instructor training, because up until then, I'm just the business guy, right? And a student. And that's life-changing. I spent, 2 intense works with one of the geniuses of the personal growth field. And another life-changing event. And then Alexander's partner died in a plane crash. He had this unfortunate hobby of antique airplanes. Who knows what a P-51 is? A lot of guys. Hey, very few women hold up their hand when I ask that question. It's still the fastest propeller airplane ever made. And he flew it into the side of a California mountain at 41 years old, and he died without a will, with 30 companies that he owned. 30. And no will. It's just a nightmare. So Alexander took that as an opportunity to sell out and leave. I think it broke his heart. He and his partner had a really great relationship. And also, Alexander changed in his life. Every 7-8 years, he did something different, and he had been with Mind Dynamics for 10 years. So he was past his sell-by date, And but he sold his shares to the estate of his late partner. I've never heard of that before or since. So I ended up working for a probate judge. I don't recommend that. Yeah, and so I quit. And that's how Lifespring got started. People say, well, did you have this grand vision? No. I didn't have a job, and I didn't think anybody could hire me, so I started this company called Lifespring. While I was running around the world with Mind Dynamics, I said no to one country, Japan. I went there for a week. I had never seen anything as foreign in my life. In Europe, there's so much similarity to our culture, not Japan. It was the most expensive place for a training company to be in business because space is so valued there that it's expensive. And plus, the language is backwards. And if any of you have any familiarity with that language, like the object in English, an object is at the end of the sentence, right? In Japanese, it's at the beginning of the sentence, etc. And we were busy, so I said no. And for 3 years after that visit, they called me every month. Japanese are nothing if not persistent. And they called me every month to come there and set up the first Mind Dynamics and then Lifespring. So we're doing a startup, and they're telling me I should fly off to Japan. So I said no many, many times, and then I sold Lifespring. I sold it to the staff for nothing down and forever to pay. Now, you know the next line, right? Who knows the next line?
And you never got paid.
They took longer than forever to pay. But they did pay me eventually. And so I was broke. I had a family, I had a mortgage, I'm unemployable, kind of, and I'm broke. And they called and they said, come for 90 days and set up a program, and then you can leave and we'll pay you for 1 year. And once again, in the kind of work that I do, people say, well, did you have this grand vision for bringing the experiential trainings to Asia? No, I was broke and I needed a job, and they offered me some money. And so now I think at a deeper level, it wasn't the money. I think God was working through me in ways that I didn't recognize then. So I went to Japan for 3 months. I stayed the first time 12 years. So I still do not teach planning. That's a joke. But it's true. We built the largest training company in Asia. We had 15 training centers in 5 countries, 240 staff, 70 full-time trainers. It was a great ride.
Did you learn Japanese?
I'm sorry.
Did you learn the language?
So does. Kodomo ni yokodake de. I said it's children's Japanese only. I could handle social, taxi, restaurants, friends. I couldn't do business in Japanese. It's a complex language. There was a guy that I met there, and my wife just fell in love with this guy because he was a former military guy. You know, the military has a lot of Olympic people in it. You know, and if you think about it, when the Olympics show up, suddenly it's this army sergeant's running, or, you know, all kinds of sports. He had been the U.S. judo nominee for one of the Olympics, and he met this Japanese lady and fell in love and got married and stayed in Japan. He had access to the PX. He became my wife's favorite person on the planet because he could buy American stuff there, you know. And and he spoke. I thought he spoke fluent Japanese. This was my first year there, and I said to my secretary one day something about, well, maybe someday I'd like to get as good in Japanese as him. And she made a face, you know, and all Japanese, you know, they value face and not showing their feelings, right? That's the culture. And women are particularly strong at that. She made a face that looked like out of a horror movie right in front of me, you know, just screwed up. I said, oh, what's wrong? And she said, you don't want to learn his Japanese. And I said, why? I don't know. She said, it's bar girl Japanese. And that is where he learned it, you know. But I'm reasonably fluent in Japanese, but not for business. You know, there's several different Japanese languages, and business Japanese is complex. And you have to learn how to speak to somebody that's older or more powerful than you, and you learn to speak a totally different language to somebody who's a subordinate, and so there's stuff like that. So I went back recently, well, it's not that recently now, 4 years ago, and spent some time in Japan, did a training there, met a lot of old friends, and I was surprised how much I remembered. So that's the good news, right? And then I was just disgusted with how much I forgot, you know, where suddenly I would just lock up and I couldn't communicate. But I have many friends there. I have an email this morning from one of my former employees in Japan. I did an acknowledgement video for his retirement ceremony, and he was so pleased about that. So that's what the email's about today. At 46, I quit, and I moved back to the U.S., and I moved originally here to Castle Pines for a couple of years, and then we did a training for John Denver and the WinStar staff, his nonprofit, and out of that came a friendship, and out of that came, I went on the board, which meant monthly trips to Aspen, and so I moved to Aspen for 12 years, and an early retirement. So I skied 80 days a year. I traveled with John for 6 months doing a presentation called Higher Ground, Bucky Fuller's work, and was on 6 nonprofit boards, had 2 birth children and 2 adopted special needs kids. I was busier than I ever was working, but I really had a lot of fun, and I lost control of my business. So I also had the experience of losing $30 million. How many of you have a brother? Is he a wise ass? It's a serious question. He's a wise and a wise ass. So I have a younger brother who's a wise ass, and he and his wife are kind to invite me to social occasions, and at one of them, the group was having a little trouble understanding my crazy life. You know, and my wife, who's very witty, and I'm uncomfortable in those kinds of settings. I mean, I'm a severe introvert on all those tests, and she's not. So she said, they're all kind of confused, and she says to them, this is at Castle Pines, with mostly retired and very rich people, frankly, and a little bit stiff. I'm looking for the right word. Formal. There are some other words I could use. And she said, well, he didn't get a job at JCPenney. I've always thought, I wish I had that. I don't know about you, but I don't have, my comebacks come back about 24 hours too late. You know, I could be brilliant if people were just in a kind of a time warp. But she could do that kind of thing. Of course, my wise-ass brother about the money thing, that was also in a social situation at one of their parties. And they were, and I said, you know, I lost control of this company and I lost a lot of money. And they said, well, how much? And I said, $30 million. And my brother very dryly said, at least you had 30 million to lose. You know, there's a way to look at it. And by that time, I was to the point where I could laugh at that. There were some times I was not laughing about that. So that's been my life. In the same 90-day period that the business imploded in Asia, my wife left me for a lawyer. And if any of you are thinking of creating a divorce in your life, try to avoid having your spouse leave you for a lawyer. Doesn't turn out well. So I went back to work. I just spent, from 2015 until 2020, just before the COVID got really bad, I spent in China. I had lived in Hong Kong for 1 year when I was expanding the business in Asia, but this was living there. That's different than being kind of this visitor. So that's been an incredible experience. 4 years of it was incredible. I spoke in front of more than 100,000 people. I trained more than 20,000 personally. I made a lot of money. I had a lot of fun. I met fascinating people. The best food in the world, you know, just was a fantastic experience. The last year, the 5th year there was no fun. They banned American trainers in China. And there were 7 American trainers living in Hong Kong but working in China. And 6 of them left the next day. And I was encouraged to stay by Chinese clients, and that didn't work out. So, but overall, the experience was fantastic. By the way, in case any of you have any kind of confidence in the American government, my Chinese friends told me in February of 2020 that their government created the virus and spread it. Now, they don't tell you that. They don't put it in print. They don't say it in a group. They come to you individually and say, we're so sorry, but we know the government did this. Many of them, they all knew. And when I got back here and heard that it was from a bat, and you know, all of those stories, it was just amusing to me. That somehow our government was not willing to tell us where it actually came from, which many people say would have made a big difference in terms of identifying it and having it work better for us. But I don't know about you, I got a lot of value from the COVID restrictions. How about you? You know, I mean, there are a lot of things not so good. I spent a lot more time with me. Turned out to be a pretty good thing. I got some, I think, reasonably good writing done, and yeah, so overall it was good. And I'm also glad it's over, or mostly over, right? So that's my history. And over that time, one more story from history, and it's about what I'd like to do with you here today and see if we can contribute to your lives and your work. I have this belief that we desperately need leadership at all levels today as never before. You know, for many years, the breakthroughs in management theory, management training, really worked to build an industrial powerhouse, and it kind of worked in families, it worked in communities. But if you think about management, it's about organizing, planning, and control. That's what it, ultimately that's what it's about. And in times of slow change, that's all that's needed. Now, those are just words, but I really want them to land for a moment. In times of slow change, all you need is competent people that can plan, organize, and control. That's enough. And that worked for us for many, many years. What's our pace of change today? Is it slow? I mean, you know, this thing's the great example, right? All of the knowledge in the world is accessible to me in a few seconds. And my schedule, and travel, and my contacts, and my family stuff. Everything is in this little hunk of metal. But we've also got a ton of changes in our culture, in our families, in how companies are run, in the greater culture. The changes are profound. The number of, I mentioned that I spoke before 100,000 people, and for personal reasons, I started asking one of two questions, or both of them. The first question was, how many of you are estranged from at least one family member? Essentially not in contact and maybe even in conflict. What do you think the number is? These are people, now I've built a little bit of trust with these audiences, but now they got to hold up their hand and say something embarrassing, right? Saying yes to that. Yeah, I'm estranged from somebody in my family. What do you think the percentage is?
70%.
Over 50?
70%.
That's the number. And that's informal. That's just me looking out at the crowd. About 2/3 of them have their hands up, kind of sheepishly. Some of them with alligator arms. You know that? The other question, by the way, was how many of you have been betrayed personally or in business? What's that number?
100%.
Thank you. 100%. I mean, I might have missed somebody. These are big crowds, but 100%. And I ask it because in my life, I was estranged from one of my children, which was just tearing me up. And I had been betrayed and lost a ton of money. So I started thinking, am I the only one? You know, so that's where the questions came from. And so the changes are affecting us, not just with technology, but in every area of our lives. And so I have a question, something, a little exercise. You can write this down or just think it. I'd like you to think of 3 leaders, people that you admire, living or dead. So just identify in your mind or make a quick note, 3 leaders that you admire for whatever reason, whatever standard you have for leadership. But identify 3 people. Now choose one of them that you think was, well, really representative of leadership for you. And let's just quickly take some feedback. Just shout out the name of one of your leaders.
Marlene.
I'm sorry?
Marlene.
Who's that?
She is a real estate agent that brought me into the business.
A good mentor?
Very much so.
Got it.
Mother Teresa.
I'm sorry?
Mother Teresa.
Good one. How about you?
You didn't hear your answer. Oh. You don't know one?
Okay.
Jesus.
Jesus. All right, behind you? with that elegant beard?
Oh, yeah, I have to think, probably just people of the past in San Diego, they helped me get started with my career. So the bosses and things that were associated through my father that also worked at John and Emmett in San Diego. I don't remember all their names, but.
So you're a committee of leadership.
Yeah.
You have a committee of leadership, right?
I think we need more leaders like FDR.
Okay.
Dr. Weston and Price.
Okay.
On a personal level, a friend of mine, Mike Stager, he was the general manager of the restaurant I worked at.
So someone close to you. Oh, okay. Interesting. Oh, Brian?
Marcus Aurelius.
Okay. And
I don't know. I was trying to think, you know?
political, business, personal, career.
I don't know. I have to think about it.
Okay.
I would say mine right now is Ryan Holiday. He wrote a book called The Obstacle is the Way, and follows Marcus Aurelius.
Interesting. You know, and this group's interesting because it wasn't so political. You didn't name a lot of political figures, and that's just interesting to me. So how many of you put your name on that list? So I've asked the question to the 100,000 people, nobody holds their hand up. We look outside for leadership. That's how we're kind of wired. That's the pattern in our culture, in a Western culture. So we don't look at ourselves first as a leader. We look at someone else. And sometimes it's somebody that's in hierarchy, somebody that's above us, or somebody that's at a distance and some celebrity involved in it. There's all kinds of reasons why we would not choose us. And they're all valid. And this is not about feeling bad that you didn't think of yourself first, because it is our culture that we don't think of ourselves first in terms of leadership. And yet that's actually what's needed and wanted, because with the pace of change that's happening in our culture and in society, in the developed world, worldwide, it's moving so fast, we can't wait for direction from above or from others. It's time for us. Individually, in our business, in our families, in our communities, it's time for us to step forward as a leader. So that's my little subject. And I look at it, and there's some theory behind it, but what I want to do in the short time that we have together is come to a place where you can actually use it today and tomorrow, and particularly in the next 90 days. So that's kind of my tee up to the theme. I believe strongly that leadership's needed at all levels, and we are it. You and me. It's time for us to step into a leadership role, no matter what our title is, no matter what our opinion about our intellect is, no matter what our title is.
This may sound silly.
Probably will.
What is leadership?
Leadership is, well, leaders, more correctly, are people that can enroll others, that can get people to follow them, hopefully for a positive purpose. But on the other hand, one great leader in many of our lifetimes is Hitler. So if we take morality out of the issue, Hitler was a great example of leadership. So there is a book called On Leadership, pretty good book by John Gardner, an educator. The way he did the book is he went out and interviewed 100 leaders. More importantly, he interviewed the people that report to them. And he asked those people, what makes that person a good leader? And one of them was Leonard, the conductor of the Los Angeles Philharmonic is Leonard Bernstein at that time. Also the author of West Side Story and, you know, all that. And they interviewed the first chair violinist, and they said, what makes him a good leader? And the answer was, he doesn't waste my time. You know, for the last 7 years of my business career, living in Aspen, not working very much, I did one training a year. It was about legacy. It was the people that were already graduates of our program, senior people in large corporations, would come to Aspen for a week and spend a week with me on their legacy. What were they going to leave behind other than money? And one of the things we did as part of that program is we went to the rehearsals of the Aspen Music Festival. You know, that's 400 musicians who spend the summer in Aspen. And it's young students, but some of the best students in the world from all over the world. And veterans, you know, people that have been in large orchestras and have a name, and they're mixed together. So in the afternoon, they do rehearsals. So I would take our class there and ask them to identify the leadership present in that group. And so over the summers doing that, I noticed that these conductors had a wide variety of skill in terms of leadership, and some of them not very good. I mean, they led with their ego, they led with screaming at people, all kinds of crazy stuff. But that answer that's in that book on leadership, I saw that also, because that what this violinist was talking about in the book is he said that Leonard trusts that I come into the rehearsal prepared, that I don't need to practice. He knows I practiced at home. And all that he needs to do is bring us together. He doesn't have to pick on us. He doesn't have to question our professionalism. He leaves us alone to do our work. And I thought, what an incredible leadership lesson. So that's kind of how I think, how I look about leadership, is that it is creating a space for someone to step into toward a purpose that we agree on. You know, there's a lot of pieces of that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So a little warm up here, kind of fun, and makes a good point. Let's go to the movies. Anybody like movies? We've kind of gotten away from going to a movie, but so I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You can write down the answers or just think about them. Hold them in your thoughts. So I'd like you to think about your favorite movie. It could be last week, and it could be 20 years ago. But what's your favorite movie? The first one that comes to mind. And by the way, there's no wrong answers in this because it's your favorite movie, right? So everybody got a movie? Got a movie? The second piece is, I'd like you to think about the most memorable character in that movie for you. And you could say the actor's name or the character's name, or just describe them in some way. You know, it might be the star of the movie, it might be a supporting actor or actress. But who's the person in that movie, in your favorite movie, who's the person that stands out to you today, memorable to you today? All right, got it? Question 3. What was the problem, the issue, the conundrum that your character faced in the movie? You can't say there wasn't one, because if there wasn't one, there wasn't a movie. I mean, that's how movies are constructed. So what was the issue, the problem that your character faced in the movie? And the fourth question is, what was the quality of mind or heart or spirit that your character brought into that movie attempting to address that problem? You know, was it courage or honesty or persistence or love, listening to a higher power? What was it that your character brought into the movie to address that issue that you've identified? Got it? All right, question number 5 is a lot more fun. What does all of that have to do with you, your life, today, in the past, maybe going into the future? You chose the movie, you chose the character, you noticed a certain problem, you noticed a solution. That all came from you. So, what does it have to do with you? Today or in the past or in the future? So I need a volunteer. Can you come up in front? Sure. So that we can, yeah, and bring the microphone, please. That'll make Anthony very happy. It doesn't take much to have Anthony be happy if you do the technology right. Great. All right, so I'm Robert. David. David, thank you for volunteering. What's the movie?
Star Wars.
Okay. And the character that's memorable to you?
Darth Vader.
Great. I love this part already. What was the issue or the problem that Darth Vader faced?
From light to darkness to redemption.
Ah, very good. And what was the quality of mind or heart or spirit that he brought into the movie to do that?
He lost himself.
Ah, yeah. He got past himself, something like that?
He didn't, well, you know, if you follow the whole story, you know, he started out in the light, he went to the darkness. In a lot of ways, it was easier because he didn't have to confront himself and the issues he was dealing with.
Who can't wait for the answer to number 5? And what's that all got to do with you, David?
Changes and reflection. Can you go back and look at yourself and say, hey, what am I doing? And notice what you're doing. And make the appropriate changes without being judgmental.
So that's been your journey?
Pretty well, part of it. There's been a lot. I have a really broad and deep background and had to go through some really challenging times. And one of the hardest lessons for me to learn is the good, bad, and the ugly is all done with love. Mm-hmm. Because that's how we learn and that's how we grow. So even though when you're going through a bad experience, and it really sucks when you're going through a bad experience.
Yes.
You're going to come out a lot better. And you kind of have to trust the process. And you don't know necessarily where it's going to lead, but you have to have a knowing that it's going to be okay.
Now, those of you with some experience around experiential learning or facilitation know that this is the time where I ask them to start using I language instead of you language.
Okay. I mean, I've been through all of that. And I've looked down and I've put together a process recently about taking responsibility, looking at yourself, letting go, moving forward, because we hold on to things from childhood or your mother, for example, and it impacts us greatly and we don't even realize how it's impacting us and what it's doing to us.
So it impacts me.
It impacts me and then in my relationships with other people.
Well, I'm kind of done for the day, and we're turning this over to David. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. If you could bring that to the back. Thank you. All right. I hope you took careful notes. So let's do this so that you have a reminder. In just a moment, I'm going to ask you to find a partner, someone you don't know well. Maybe you didn't know them at all before you came here today. But certainly someone that you don't know well. So we're going to talk about a movie. I wonder if there's something that shows up better. Maybe red. You're going to talk about the character. You're going to talk about useless pens. Hey! Who's the character? You're going to explore the issue that they faced, the solution, mind, heart, or spirit, and we're going to talk about you. So you're going to find a partner and you're going to interview them, take turns interviewing them about these 5 questions. Now, David was really an excellent example because what some people, you're going to have 3 minutes each to do this. David was an excellent example because we handled the first 4 questions in 30 seconds. Did you notice that? Pretty quick. Anybody who doesn't want to talk about themselves will start wanting to give you the entire story of the movie. That's not the point, right? Of the exercise. So find a partner, somebody you didn't know well before you came here today, sit down with them so you can move around, find a place to sit, and then take turns interviewing. I'll tell you after 3 minutes is up so you can change partners. Okay, so you've got 3 minutes to interview the other person, and then I'll shout something and then you change, and you don't change partners, you just change roles, right? And the other person's the interviewer and you're the interviewee. So that's it. Find a partner and move.
I am so sorry. I have to leave.
I'm sorry?
Could you turn the speaker off so I can talk to you privately? I don't want them to hear me. Is it off?
I can't turn it off.
Oh, you can't. So I just wanted to say, I so enjoy you, but I have to leave because I have to get to Colorado Springs, and I wish I could stay.
You will break my heart, but I will have a memory of your beautiful smile, and thank you for letting me know.
I loved your smile and everything, so thank you. And I loved the exercise.
Which one have you watched the movie more than once? Yeah. That might pick one. Thank All right, so Golden. We don't have a lot of time here to go over it. So the movie is Golden. And what's the what character in this? Oh, that's pretty big.
Yeah, and it took about 30 years.
So it wasn't for so that's pretty even. So how do they what's the country? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so they have these outsmart.
Well, I don't know how to say it, but it's
I'm gonna take a stab somewhere.
That's exciting. My version is, you know, they talk about
Keep the world.
none of that is like he is.
I'm curious why
So
dirt didn't take the track.
This is about you.
No way.
It's so important.
It's gonna be over and it's very honorable.
You know, he didn't care about the monetary gain of the,
And it's the persistence
of the treasure. He cared more about his back.
Yeah.
Does anyone need more time? Person number one? You okay? All right, switch roles.
Instead of hating myself, there are things that I could.
That's my favorite character.
But at the time, I was doing the best.
The main character that I was looking for.
I used to tell people, just fire attack and second time was trying to get to the point. This is all I can see.
Every time it comes up.
So it's like no one was really in the
That's crazy. She said, you know, she said,
Crap stuff. And then maybe years later, oh, that's what it is.
And she said, and she just went on.
Does anyone need more time? So 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Please bring that to a close and thank your partner. You guys like to talk to each other. I guess that's better than the alternative. All right, some quick feedback. What did you notice in the last 10 minutes? What did you notice?
Connection
Connection means
with the other person.
you got more connected to the other person. Was it better or worse than the average cocktail party or networking event?
Oh, much better.
Yeah. You know, when you talk about something that's important to you, what's going on with you instead of where you work and what you do, relationships get built more quickly. That's okay. What else? What did you notice?
Authenticity.
I'm sorry.
Authenticity.
So you sense that in the other person? How about in you? And in you. So there was something about the structure of the exercise that called forth you being more real. That's very interesting. How many of you have seen the Brene Brown YouTube video on vulnerability? No. If you haven't seen it, see it. The last time I looked at it, 55 million views. Now, I don't think 55 million people watched it. I think they're like me. Some people watched it 3 times. How many of you watched it more than once? Yeah. I mean, it's just brilliant. I mean, she's brilliant. And one of the reasons that I think it's so popular is she not only talked about vulnerability, she modeled it. She was so authentic, talking about her kind of research-oriented brain and how that wasn't adequate to the future that she wants to create. Those are my words, not hers, but that's how I talk about that. What else? Anything else you noticed? Yes.
I got a little emotional just describing mine because I could see that it was. I got a little emotional talking about mine because I could see that it was the things that I really liked about my character was what I was wanting to do in my life.
To express it, actually express it.
Yeah.
Who you really are into the world. It's kind of tied to that authentic piece, you know. But again, it's just a little trick to get us to be more authentic and to be more open, to be more honest. How about the energy in the room? Now, this room is way too big for this size of group, right? You know, if you know anything about group process, this ain't the room. But did you notice anything about the energy in the room in the last 10 minutes? Same?
I think kind of went from our heads to our hearts.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a little bit louder. There was more fun. There was more laughter. There were more smiles. That's what I noticed from here. So when I went to Japan, when I decided to stay there, I made a decision that I would study Zen. And it was a lie, but I did say that at one point. You know, you're saying, why should I stick around in this very foreign country? And one of the reasons was, well, I should study Zen. I was kind of fascinated with it. And I did go to 1 3-day Zen program. So, and what I learned there was, number one, I don't like to get up at 3:30 in the morning. That was my first learning. Secondly, I don't like a macrobiotic diet. Maybe I should like it, but I don't. And thirdly, I don't like getting hit in the back with a stick. Reminds me too much of my mother. But I'm fascinated with Zen Buddhism. I just am not a very good student of it. But one of the Zen sayings is that fish do not describe water very well. Now, you know, all of those Zen koans are made to be confusing, right? To force your mind to kind of double back on itself and look at things in a different way. But fish do not describe water very well. We don't describe the world we live in very well. We get numb to it. We don't describe oxygen very well. I remember years ago I learned that in northern Alaska, the Inuits, the Indian tribe there, Native American tribe, have 120 different definitions for snow. They can describe it 120 different ways. There's not much going on up there. I suppose you could really get interested in snow, and there's a lot of it. So the Zen way of looking at this little exercise would be this statement: there's no movie out there. Do you get that? We make it all up. You know that person in your family that you have a family gathering and they always irritate you? How many of you have one of those? Tell the truth. That's a low number of hands. You're a wonderful, loving, compassionate group.
Or not honest.
Or you're not honest. Yeah, that's a possibility too. Or you've got alligator arms. No. That person that irritates you, it's not about them. There's no person out there. That movie that you liked, some other person saw it. All other people saw a different movie. I'm doing this exercise with, that most recent 20,000 people, and they do the example in the front of the room. So a very popular movie that people choose is Titanic, by the way, especially women. That movie really got women. I figured that out. And so this woman comes up front, very attractive young woman, right? I'm not a stupid facilitator. That's who I choose. Generally, David, you're an exception. You're kind of a handsome devil. So this was a very, very attractive, I'd say 28-year-old Chinese woman. And I said, what's your favorite movie? Titanic. What's your most memorable character? And I'm thinking that she's going to say what? The Kate Winslet figure. I'm trying to think of her name in the movie. Rose, right? Or Jack. That's what I'm listening for. And she says the name of that guy that was the evil boyfriend. Remember that guy?
Oh, yeah.
But now I'm trapped, right? I'm in front of about 300 people, and she's there, and how do I get out of this? Is what I'm thinking. And then I said, well, what was the issue that he faced? And she just straight up, she says, a disloyal girlfriend. It's true. And then I said, well, what did he bring to solve that problem? Because now I'm trapped. I got to do this thing. And she said, he would do anything, up to and including murder, to get what he wanted. Okay, I said, well, what's that got to do with you? And she just very plainly, she said, well, I'm looking for a man that would appreciate my loyalty and take care of me and have a lot of money. And she goes on and on. And she describes this guy that she's looking for. She's serious about it. The point being, she saw a different movie than most of us saw, based upon her priority at the time, which is get married to a rich guy. And by the way, in China, that's not unusual. They kind of, you got to show your financial statement on the second date, that kind of stuff. And the families start talking about your background and what school you went to and how much money you have and what your future looks like. Actually, that's true all over Asia. So there's nothing out there. And the tip that comes out of this is to pay attention to your feelings. The four major ones: mad, sad, glad, and afraid. Anger, sadness, joy, and fear. And when they happen, when a piece of music touches you, when a movie reaches you in some way, when another person gets you, and again, maybe it's anger, but maybe it's joy. I'm like, why did that person create so much joy? I was in Cheyenne, Wyoming yesterday, and then on the way back, we stopped in Longmont. I introduced two friends that didn't know each other. And when we got back in the car, the friend that I was driving with said, what an amazing man. I just feel so happy being around him. I've known that guy 20 years. He was a client of mine 20 years ago. He creates joy around him. And if somebody creates joy around you, is that about them? Or are they touching something in you? that is less expressed than perhaps you'd like it to be. Or that it's, hey, this resonates with me. This is how I want to live, and I want to be around people like that. You know, it's all about you. So when we talk about this leadership subject, it starts with, it's all about you. It's not about externals, the environment, the people around you, the situations, the job, what's in the news. It's all about us. So here's the concluding little exercise. Oh, and by the way, the reason that this shows up so well is it's the wrong pen, and it's going to take them weeks to get this off. So here we go. Let's just say that in the next few minutes, we want to take a look at how we can improve our awareness, our consciousness, and our delivery of leadership in our families, in our companies, in this community, and in the nation, in the world. What I'm going to posit, so we're doing the 3-day program here in 3 minutes, by the way, is that the basis of all leadership is relationships. And the way I prove that, since I am a simple person, is the summer road trip. So if you've got kids, I have a lot of kids, when they were younger, Dad would come up with some idea for the summer vacation road trip. You know, seeing the world's biggest ball of string and, you know, all of those kinds of wonderful ideas that dads have. And I have 2 daughters, 2 birth daughters, Megan and Alicia. Alicia, I had birth training. I don't know if any of you have done that, but I went 6 months of birth training. I delivered her. I clamped the cord, I cut it, I cleaned her up, I did all that stuff. So I delivered her. And I've always, and you know, you can't tell your kids this, but she's always been my favorite. And she is totally oppositional. From a little tiny thing, she was oppositional. Today, she's at the United Nations, at Columbia University and at the United Nations, and singing in a rock band on the weekend. She's a little superstar, and she's still oppositional, by the way. But if I'm going to run the idea of the summer road trip by her, I have a choice with her or her sister Megan. And Megan is little, hey, let's look at this. Let me see how I can support you. Hey, maybe I have some ideas. I'll gather some other ideas. I'll talk to the other kids. Which one do I go to with the idea for the summer road trip? Do I go to Alicia, who's going to shoot me down and make me feel guilty for ever considering that ball of string? No. I'm going to go to the person with whom I have the best relationship. And that's true everywhere in life. Because you all know that leading is about creating something new. Managing is dealing with already exist. Leadership's about innovation, and it's about change, and it's about trying things in a different way to bring people with you. So what you do is you go to the people with whom you have the best relationship. So what that argues for is you don't pay attention directly to leadership. You pay attention directly to relationships, so that when you need them, it's like a trust account or a bank account. You know, you make deposits into that account so that when you need it, you can withdraw. You know, you get to the point where you can say, look, this is a test of this is going to be a little bit of a test of relationship. I'm going to ask you to go along with me on something. But you better have a lot in your trust account when that happens. Because to get this out of theory, the basis of all relationships is, in fact, trust. And again, speeding things up a bit, since we're getting closer and closer to 9 o'clock, we'll get to the practical part. This comes from exhaustive studies at the University of Minnesota, where they determined that all trust is, I'll trust you if it's all conditional. You may like that, you may dislike that, you may think that's wrong, it's not fair. It's reality. Everyone in your life is running that little program, usually unconsciously, called I'll trust you if. So I'll trust you if you are who you say you are. How's that one? I'll trust you if you are who you say you are. You know, you say you're a good friend, a loyal friend. Let's see how you behave. I'll trust you if you say that you're familiar with Office 360 and all these computer tools in the office. Well, you better be able to deliver on that. If you are what you say you are. I'll trust you if you do what you say you will do. Meet you Wednesday for coffee at Starbucks. What time do you show up? A lot of answers to that question, folks. But there are people that, perhaps even in this room, that pretty reliably show up at 10:15, not 10 o'clock. And by the way, what do you say when you show up at 10:15?
Sorry I'm late.
Sorry I'm late, and? But they gotta have the, oh no, you don't say that. You say your excuse, unless you're more enlightened than most people. The traffic was really horrible. My alarm didn't go off. I got a phone call just before I was leaving the office. I thought once that, you know, you could do a business, a franchise business, selling excuses, because most people have old, tired excuses. Wouldn't they pay for new ones? You know, and I was thinking, like, you could price it with quantity, like 3 for $100 or something like that. Anyway, that's one of my business ideas. So you give your excuse, and what do they say? That's all right. I was checking my phone. I was girl watching or boy watching. I was enjoying my coffee. You have an excuse for putting up with their lie, because it's almost always a lie. And the more colorful way to say it is, you have an agreement. I'll buy your bullshit if you buy mine. And what happens there, subliminally, subconsciously, is trust goes down. When you don't do what you say you're going to do, even on minor things, trust goes down. You do major breaking of agreements, and trust gets destroyed. And I'm sure you've all seen that somewhere in your life, or in your family, or in your company. You know, right now, there's a pretty strong distrust right now in American institutions, and where it comes from is broken agreements. If you dig into it a little bit, what some people said didn't turn out to be true. They didn't do what they said they were going to do. An unfair one, but true. I'll trust you if you are who I expect you to be. So a lot of people have beliefs about leadership, as an example, and if you don't meet them, things go south pretty quickly. And it's all, again, usually subconscious. When I came back to the U.S. and moved our U.S. business, we had a research and development lab in Jacksonville, Florida. I brought it to Denver, and we started actually actively selling corporate culture change work. In Asia, every single person was a graduate of our program first, before we hired them. An accounting clerk, an IT person, everybody went to our training first. So they were grounded in personal responsibility, open and honest communication, list goes on, right? The things we teach in our trainings. So I come to the US, we don't do the public trainings in the US. We finally did one because of this problem. But we hired immensely qualified people, and people that wanted to work for us. We had a reputation, and some really great people wanted to work for us. And after about 6 months, I was living in Castle Pines, the office in the tech center. I'm on I-25, and I'm thinking, I don't want to go to work. It's my company. I don't want to go to work. And I was asking myself why. And then I took our own medicine. I hired a consultant, an outsider, and I had him interview our people. And what I learned is I was not being dad. You know what that means? There are a lot of people in the world that are very capable, very accomplished, very talented, and they're missing dad. They don't have the father that they thought they should have, or their father died, or all kinds of stuff. And they project that onto the leader of a company that they work in. I wasn't telling them what to do. I wasn't being the gentle mentor when they needed it. I was running the company the same way I ran it in Asia. It didn't work. They weren't graduates. So we had a big meeting. I said, you know, at this point, I'm not going to change. So you either need to get some therapy and deal with your dad and stuff, or you just need to know that I'm not going to fill that role and find someone else for it. Which, by the way, it worked. It fixed our company. But you'll lose trust if you're not being the person they think you should be, even though that's not fair. So you have to clear that up. You have to bring it up and talk about it. And finally, for purposes of our work together this morning, I'll trust you if you're open and honest. That's the biggest one. That's Brene Brown's, that's vulnerability, that's all of that stuff. And now I will want to talk and talk and talk so I don't have to model this for you, and which is hard. So I have to model it, and then I'm going to ask you to do it. In just a moment, I'm going to ask you to to find a partner. Maybe a different one would be good, but not necessarily. And share a secret. And I'll define a secret as something you normally don't share with people in a networking or social situation. But it has an impact on you. That secret has an impact on you, your personal life and or your business life. So my example of that is, and by the way, I've now been back in the U.S. for 2 years, and I think things are a lot better than what I'm about to describe. But up until recently, this was all true. My oldest son, Tom, has AIDS. I have he was HIV positive for 13 years and healthy. And then it progressed to AIDS. I have walked into a hospital room twice to say goodbye to him. Where the doctor comes and says, you've got less than 24 hours. So if you've got anything to say, go say it now. I can't tell you what that experience is like, really. I don't have words for that. I'm also happy to say that he's alive. He was well enough to visit me in Hong Kong 4 years ago. Thanks to modern medicine and good nutrition, yoga, I don't know, something's working. He's still sick, but he's okay. And he's still taller, more fit, more handsome than me. I don't like that part. But he's okay. That's been my secret, and the reason I don't share it is because in social and business settings, particularly if they're all male, jokes are told about gay men and about AIDS. It's common. It was common. It's less common, I'm finding today. It's an improvement in our culture. But when that would happen, what do you think I would do? Somebody does a little quick gay joke or AIDS joke.
You wouldn't do anything.
That's right, David. And I would do something. I would withdraw.
You withdraw. I mean, you wouldn't go say anything. You withdraw to yourself. And then you beat yourself up because you withdrew.
Exactly. I mean, and physically, the physical thing that really got to me was I would push myself back away from a table. I mean, I physically would do that. Like pull myself out of the circle. And then I started coming up with excuses to leave. And I've done that many, many times. I don't like, as a man and as a father, I don't like that. But I don't like that about me. But that'd be how I would behave. And in a business setting, whatever my or in a social setting, whatever contribution I represent in the world would be removed from that meeting. in a more philosophical sense. But on the personal sense, you're right on target. I judge myself and beat myself up. I want to hit somebody, all the male stuff. All right. So that's my secret. You now know my secret, because when people if people know that, they don't make the jokes. 100% true. With people that know about my son and about basically the worst 5 years of my life, they don't make jokes about being gay or having AIDS. They ask me how he's doing. They suggest therapies. They ask if I've seen him recently. They're humans, right? But that's my secret. That's how it affects me and has affected me in my life. So what's your secret, and how does holding that affect you?
Robert, unfortunately, we don't have time for this activity. Can we bring it to an end?
We can. We'll do this way. What I'd like you to do is to think about in the next 90 days, but particularly in the next 24, 48 hours, is think about what you can share in being more vulnerable. It doesn't mean you share a secret like the one I just shared with you. I did one that's dramatic and important in my life for a purpose, to get your attention. But think about the relationships. Well, going back to here, people will trust you if you're open and honest. That's what builds trust. That's what improves relationships. That's what positions you as a leader. So find some examples to do it, and do it in the next 24, 48 hours. With the people that are important to you, the people that you need to build trust with and build a better relationship with, start sharing more of yourself with them. I'm going to stay, and if you're interested in my book, Living an Extraordinary Life, this is the only place you can get a signed copy. And I'll be there for whatever amount of time you like. It's been great being with you. Thank you for participating. Thanks for your comments, your questions, for being alive and being engaged in this wonderful organization. Grab a few of your friends and get them to start coming here in person. We are social beings. Zoom ain't it. We gotta press some flesh. We gotta get some hugs and say some prayers together and be fully human. Thank you all. It's great to be with you. Oh, one thing I learned last night, I've got a problem with my website. I do a weekly email called an Extraordinary Minute. Once a week, you get something that's a 1-minute read, a comment, a quote or something that I'm interested in, and my comments about it. There's also a 28-page summary of our work that's been developed over the last 30 years. They're both free. If you email me, we'll get the website fixed today, but email me, and then I'll get you signed up for that and send you that PDF, which is shareable. You can share it with anybody. Robert@extraordinarypeople.com. Robert@extraordinarypeople.com. I'd love to hear from you. If I could.
Let's hear it again for Robert.
Thank you. Oh.